Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, ANITA FINLEY.
KARP, it's been great listening. I love listening to your commercial, but here you are in the flesh. How are you?
Good morning. I am fine. How are you?
Oh, I'm great, thank you. And it's a beautiful day outside. You know, I sit in the studio here and can see the sunrise come up, and it's so nice. And of course, we learned so much from your articles. The one now in the May issue says, "Don't choke on estate planning decisions." What does that mean?
What happens is my clients, as many of us, just freeze because they can't figure out who to name normally of their children to be in charge of financial affairs, who should be a trustee, who should be a power of attorney, who should be the healthcare surrogate, who should be the personal representative of the estate. They twist and they turn and they choke, they freeze. Just like a good athlete does everything well until game time, and they just panic. And they just find themselves frozen and choking on making those decisions. And from my vantage point, and it's usually not, who do I leave what to? Most traditional families end up traditionally and typically, most typical families end up leaving their children things equally. Sometimes they have some variance, and usually that's not the difficulty for them. And I discuss that with them, and we talk about that. But where they really have difficulty, and all of you mothers out there can understand this as we approach Mother's Day, is when they're giving people the decision-making / the power. And they're afraid of offending anyone. They don't know what to do. And they're torn. And my attitude is you got to get past it. Otherwise, your indecision is a decision, and it's a bad decision. And remember, as long as you're capable and competent, you can change that decision. I had a client who signed documents last week who has a son who is a very, very reputable doctor, very successful. My client's a doctor. My client's daughter has a job as a traditional office worker. Geographically, they are both equally inconvenient to him. And came down to who should make his medical decisions. And everybody listening here today would say, well, of course, his son, the doctor. And he has good relationships with both. And, of course, he thought his son, that everybody would think, well, you name your son the doctor. There's no question.
Right.
And he said, I'm naming my daughter first. And I said, is your son going to be offended? And he said, he may be, but my daughter has more empathy. She has a greater understanding of me. My son cares about me and loves me, and I love him, but my daughter is the right one to make these decisions. She knows me. So, everybody would have thought, no, he's got to go with the doctor's son. And he said, I'm going to tell my son, your sister just knows me better. She'll talk to you about the medical aspects. You won't be shut out from medical information. But your sister knows me. And I have the same thing when it comes to financial affairs. Sometimes the more competent one is, or more knowledgeable one, is either too busy or it would be too disruptive, and they might not get to it. It's a lower priority for them. Sometimes there's reasons that where the children don't get along, you have to name a third party and come to terms. Unfortunately, there are many mothers out there today as we approach Mother's Day whose children do not get along with each other. They get along adequately with their parents, but they don't get along with each other. Not that they just live separate lives and don't have much to do with each other, but there are strong sibling issues. You can't name one without creating a problem. I had a conversation with a client yesterday. Her son and daughter don't get along. And I said, "You're naming your daughter?" She said, "Yes, she's right in their argument, so I'm going to name her." I said, "And he thinks he's right, and when you die, and it's a modest estate, he's going to hire a lawyer and make life miserable for her. You shouldn't name either of them to handle your finances, particularly when you're dead. Particularly when and she wants to divide things equally. I said, particularly when it's going to be equal. I said, your daughter is going to be in charge, right? Yep. She'll sell the house. Yep. I said, will he agree with the price of the house that she thinks should be had? And you could see her stop dead in her tracks and said, never. I said, will he agree that she shouldn't distribute any money until she's sure the house is sold in case she needs to use some of the money for a roof or repairs or hold it on the market longer if the market goes south? She said, no, he'll want money right away and say she's just holding back from him. And by the way, the daughter has no more money than the son or anything. It's just, and I said, you've got to deal with these issues. Be honest about it. I said, will it cost more in dollars to have the third party do it? And she said, yeah, that's what I don't want to do. I said, I don't know that it'll necessarily cost more. If she's got to hire a lawyer to defend her and he's got to hire a lawyer to go after her, you've got two lawyers biting at each other, and the first thing your daughter's going to do is need a lawyer to assist her anyway in handling things because she's got to cover her backside with her brother. And just sometimes people are too busy. So people just freeze. Well, I'll name them all. Well, that's creating chaos. Yeah, and you know what they say is, what's a camel? A horse formed by a committee.
Well, Joe, I have to say, just to interrupt you here a little bit, I think I did mention it that recently I have been, people like to talk to me, they want advice from me, and variously, it comes up that my brother doesn't want me to do this with my mother, and of course I'm the one taking care of my mother, and my brother's up north, and they're going to come down, and we're having fights, and I'm hearing this all the time, and I said, well, what is your mother thinking? Well, my mother doesn't want anyone to be upset. And this is so typical, isn't it?
Yeah, and we can't make people's behavior, we can't change attitudes and behavior. But what we can do is delineate who's going to be in charge. This is the person in charge. And don't be secretive. I don't want my son to know my daughter's in charge until I'm dead. Oh, that'll make it peaceful.
Right. Oh, boy.
And people don't give this information, so much so that sometimes they don't tell the daughter she's in charge. And I sit there, and frequently I'll have my clients who are in their 60s come in, and in the course of doing their estate planning, I'll tell them we'll discuss it, and we'll talk about what's going on, and I'll say, look, you've got to advise to certain people, etc. And then I say, they'll mention that they have parents in their late 80s or 90s, and I'll say, who's in charge of your mother's decisions? Well, I don't know. I said, if you got a call right now that your mother fell, who's in charge? Is her second husband in charge of her health care? She said, I hope not. He's got dementia. I said, well,
wow.
But this is the real world.
Yeah.
Do you know what she's done? Do you have paperwork to document any of it? And getting this information out and dealing with it, it's a difficult conversation. I had a client whose very interesting. She has a son whom she loves, but she is effectively estranged from him because of his own aberrational behavior. And he's part of her estate. She has one child. And he said to her, he wrote to her and said, she wrote that she's left me in charge of her estate and her medical decisions if she can't make them. And he wrote back, why are you using a non-family member? And we had that conversation this week, me and her. She said, I don't even know his phone number. I don't have an email address for him.
Oh, my gosh.
How does he expect that he could have that responsibility? She said he can't be aware of my medical condition. He doesn't know what I think about my health care. He does not know anything about my life. She said, I want to provide for him when I pass. He has chosen a life that works for him, and I respect that. She said, I don't interpret it at all as anything other than that's the way he needs to have a happy life, and that's fine. I said, well, how do you feel about Mother's Day, and he's not showing up? She said, my dread on Mother's Day is that out of the blue he'll call and he will show up. It gives me more stress knowing he'll appear than that he won't.
Oh, my goodness.
She said, because it's just always so stressful with him, because this is not where he wants to be. He has his own world. And, other than the fact that he's disassociated from his parents and now just his mother, he's not a bad guy. I mean, there's no evilness in him, but that's what he needs. So people have to start to deal with their realities. And unfortunately, and I'll share this with your mother clients that are listening today, and I may have said this before, 25 years ago when I first started doing this full time, I would have one client every 2 or 3 months who had a strained or estranged relationship with a child. Today, 1 in 4 or 5 of our clients has that.
Really?
So as you're listening, ladies, and you're feeling badly about your relationship with one child, and you're even in denial to your friends, family, and neighbors, you don't want to share it with them, and that's your business not to share it. There is a virus out there. I don't know what it is, but there is something that has changed human behavior. And mothers, you haven't changed. You were the same person you were when your son or daughter was loving and attentive and appreciative. There's just something cooking out there. And you did the right things. You didn't do anything with malice. And every parent makes mistakes. They don't come with a handbook, because if they did, after you read the handbook, you'd say, no thanks, I'm not buying. I can't assemble this thing and figure out how to keep it running right. You're putting it together as best as you can, and your children are the products of what they've made themselves. And for those of you who are blessed with children who care for you and care for each other, stop and be thankful. But if they're not, be thankful for what you've got.
Those are great words, and I do hear you, and I know your feelings. I know how you were with your mother and the kind of person you are. And yes, I think you're absolutely right, and I do blame society. I do blame the internet and the social media and what's happened about people just not understanding about their families, the distance that, people live here and they live up north. and I love I don't love what you said, but it is so true. How can someone be in charge of the person's medical care if they don't even have a phone number to call them or to have no idea what they're going through? I don't understand it.
And the answer is, and neither does that child. They don't understand their position. It's not a rational decision, and that's true here. I mean, and by the way, if you have children who don't get along, you really have to let them know who's in charge. If you have children with different, I met with a family the other day, and the daughter and son-in-law came in, and the son was not there, and the father was there. We had known the family, and they came in for a little conversation just because they wanted to meet the follow-up guy. And the son is fiscally a tad irresponsible, and the daughter is not. But the daughter is ultra-Orthodox Jewish, and the daughter sat there quite freely saying, look, I cannot make my father's medical decisions because my religious beliefs are far different from his with regard to termination of life supports and care. And I'm glad I can get medical information, but I understand that I can't do it, and that my brother will. But the conversation was had so that the brother is not going to have an argument with his sister when the time comes to terminate life supports. He's not going to be saying, do this, and she'll say, you can't, it's against my religious beliefs. There was the openness and understanding of people's differences, and so it's going to be, someday the brother's going to have to make a decision that the daughter will respect his responsibility and that she's not part of that process. And that's a good thing. So if you handle the differences properly, you can help not make it crazy. You can talk about the fact that, Bob and Sue, you're both good with managing money, but Bob, you're divorced, you have 2 kids, you're running around with visitation, you have a job, and you're busier than heck. Your sister's married to her husband. She works, but she has flexibility on time, and she has the ability to handle the finances, handle the bills, handle the stuff if something happens to me. And just tell them. So it's not always a negative about the person who you're not designating. It's a reality-based thing. Mm. So that's why people choke. And I'm giving people right now who are listening, I'm telling you, there are some people whose stomachs are churning because they don't want to deal with these issues. The number of people who come into me when we start talking about who, they say, you know what? That's why I've been putting this off.
Right.
And I say, well, while you were putting it off, this is the effect of that decision. Because no decision is a decision. You could face a guardianship. This is who would be legally entitled to make your medical decisions. This is who would get your money when you die. And I didn't know that. So the answer is, indecision is a decision, and it's usually the worst decision.
Yes, that's true. That's really true.
It's easy. I mean, avoidance is easy. Don't stick your head in the sand. It doesn't work very well for resolution because you know what happens if your head's in the sand. You need a kick in the butt.
Right. Let me give everybody some information now. Your seminars are you're actually going to have them, in June, right? So I want to talk about those too. But the one thing I do want to share with everybody is the fact that we have someone who will give it his time and tell you so many things. These are free. It's still, I can't believe that all this is free, but you just really need to go and hear Joe KARP speak because you'll learn so much. So let me tell you about it. These are free senior survival workshops. You'll hear about new tax laws. You'll hear about Medicaid. There's so many things that have changed, and Joe keeps up with all this. So the first one will be Tuesday, June the 6th, from 1:30 to 4, and he goes all the way up to Port St. Lucie in the Holiday Inn there. Because if you live up in Jupiter or you live even a little bit further away from there, you really do need to, it'd be good for you to be up in that area. But you don't have to do that because he also has them here in Palm Beach County. Wednesday, June the 7th, from 1:30 to 4 at the Palm Beach Gardens Marriott. And then Thursday, June the 8th, from 1:30 to 4, the Courtyard by Marriott in Boynton Beach. Now, no reservations are required. However, you really should make sure that there's been no changes. There usually aren't. But why don't you go on the website just to confirm everything you're doing, learn a little bit more about Joe KARP and his staff. And that's karplaw.com, KARPLAW.com. If you need to talk to them and there's any kind of information you want that you don't want to wait for these seminars or there's something else you want to talk to them about, the number is 1-800-893-9911. 1-800-893-9911. How many years have you been doing these seminars?
Since 1994. And one of the things I want to tell people is one of the things we offer is people who attend, if we think we can help them, they will get a free consultation. There's very few people we don't think we can help. But if you're a Pennsylvanian, we're going to say you need to see a Pennsylvania lawyer and things like that. And I'll tell you who's listening who thinks they don't need to come that do need to come.
Oh.
And this is the reality of our practice today. In 1994, when I started doing these, everybody who came in, nobody had a trust. Nobody had a trust. And 1995, 96, all along, people who came in didn't have a trust. Today, 75% of the people who come in have trusts. They don't understand them. They are stale because of changes in the law. They are ticking time bombs with regard to certain things. They haven't stayed on top of it. They haven't communicated with the lawyer. They haven't had their documents reviewed. They think that their trust, I did it, and it's fine. And if you have not had your estate plan reviewed by a competent elder law or estate planning lawyer in the last 3 years, having all your documents checked out, you are doing yourself a disservice. And here's one difference between us and Dr. Mencia. We don't charge to give that second opinion. You come to the workshop, you will get a free second opinion as to where your estate plan sees. Dr. Mencia is a good and wonderful doctor, but if you come to Dr. Mencia for a second opinion, and it's well worth paying him, you get to pay him and get a second opinion. You come to us for a second opinion, you won't pay for the opinion. Will you pay if you fix everything? Sure. Will you pay if you bring your documents up to date? Sure. And is that cheaper than having somebody deal with it in a catastrophic situation when your documents don't do what you want it to do, when you find out that they no longer accomplish your goals? And sometimes, guess what? You don't find out. It's whoever's handling your affairs. So if you're sitting there saying, well, I don't need to go, I already have a trust. Or I don't need to go, I don't need a trust, I have a will and I have a power of attorney and I have a living will. Oh, really? You're so sure that your documents now meet your needs. I've met with people. I had a husband and wife I met with 2 weeks ago. I didn't meet with the wife. She's got Alzheimer's, and she is unable to make any decisions. And when I reviewed their documents that were done by a lawyer, I showed them, in their case, I showed the husband the defects in the documents. Forget about the fact that I told him his power of attorney had to be changed because He still had his wife named as the person to handle all of his affairs.
Joe, I hate to. Yeah, we've run out of time. I've been really hoping that we would close this off, but so let's just say those kinds of instances are what you do at your seminars. So let's just
and we
hold
offer
that.
everybody an opportunity, virtually everybody an opportunity to get a free review.
Thank you.
Happy
Thank you,
Mother's
Joe.
Day to
Thank
all,
you so
and
much.
Give yourselves a hug.
Okay, thank you,
Dr.
Joe.
Mencia can't come visit you.
Goodbye.
And hug and kiss you. Do it for yourself.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.